Imagine an island bathed in sunlight, where the sea is a constant companion, cradling a civilization that thrived over 3,000 years ago. A place where vibrant cities rose without walls and peaceful prosperity flowed from art and trade rather than from conquest. This is Crete. This is the Minoan Civilization, Europe's first advanced society, yet strangely forgotten by history. Who were these people who left behind sprawling palaces, intricate art, and an economy that stretched across the Mediterranean? What caused their sudden disappearance, leaving only ruins and unsolved mysteries in their wake? The Minoans remain a riddle, and today we'll embark on a journey to uncover their world, to find out what made them flourish and what led to their downfall. What could a society without armies, without fortresses, possibly teach us about the foundations of power and influence? Long before the might of Athens or the glory of Rome, the Minoans had already created a thriving civilization that shaped the ancient Mediterranean. Their power wasn't rooted in the battlefield, but in their mastery of the sea. Trade routes crisscrossed the waves, and with every exchange of goods, they shaped the cultures that came into contact with them. Their palaces weren't just grand structures, they were hubs of commerce, art and religious life, unlike anything the ancient world had seen before. But how did they manage it? How did a people who prized peace build a network that stretched from Egypt to Mesopotamia, becoming the envy of their age? Today, we'll explore their palaces, delve into their art, and unearth the secrets of a civilization that ruled not by the sword, but by trade and innovation. Three 3,000 years before Europe knew the strength of the Roman Empire, the Minoans had already mastered the art of trade and diplomacy. Unlike the warriors of later civilizations, the Minoans chose a different path, one paved with connection and innovation. They ruled not by conquest but by their dominance of the sea, and through this they achieved a kind of prosperity that still leaves us in awe today. While other ancient powers forged empires with swords, the Minoans forged connections with ships. They were masters of the sea long before any other Mediterranean power dared to claim the waves. From their island of Crete, the Minoans established vast trade networks that stretched across the ancient world. Their ships carried precious goods, copper from Cyprus, gold from Egypt, and ivory from Africa. But it wasn't just material wealth they transported. Ideas flowed with the tides, as the Minoans shared their art, religion, and culture with distant lands. Through these exchanges, they became not just traders but cultural pioneers, introducing their intricate pottery, frescoes, and religious symbols to far-reaching places. The key to their success, the Aegean Sea, which served as both their protector and their highway to influence. Imagine this, a Minoan ship arriving at the port of Egypt, its deck loaded with olive oil, pottery, and textiles, but the exchange goes both ways. They return with papyrus, exotic animals, and precious metals, further fueling the growth of their peaceful society. This constant flow of goods made the Minoans the middlemen of the ancient world, connecting empires that were far more powerful militarily. But this dominance came with its own risks. The same sea that brought them prosperity could also turn against them. And while the Minoans relied on diplomacy and trade, it left them vulnerable when nature or their enemies struck. On the island of Crete, among its sun-kissed hills and valleys, rose the magnificent palaces of the Minoans. Structures that were not just grand in scale, but innovative in design. Knossos, Phaistos, and other palaces stood as architectural wonders, centuries ahead of their time, with engineering marvels that would not be seen again until the rise of the Roman Empire. How could a society without modern tools or technology build multi-story palaces complete with running water, drainage systems, and earthquake-resistant features? The Minoan palaces weren't just places of residence for kings. They were complex hubs of administration, trade, and religion. Their architecture reflected a deep understanding of engineering principles. Despite being built thousands of years before the Romans, these palaces featured advanced water systems with indoor plumbing and drainage that rivaled anything seen in the ancient world. At Knossos, water was channeled through clay pipes, ensuring that fresh water flowed throughout the palace while waste was efficiently disposed of. But their innovations didn't stop with water management. Earthquakes were common in this part of the world, and the Minoans developed techniques to protect their palaces from destruction. At Knossos, flexible columns and open courtyards absorbed the shock of earthquakes, ensuring the palace would endure even the strongest tremors. These techniques, centuries ahead of their time, would later be adopted by the Greeks and Romans. Yet, as impressive as their palaces were, there was something deeper within them. Symbols, rituals, and hidden meanings woven into the very architecture. The palace at Knossos, with its labyrinthine design, might have inspired one of the most famous myths in Greek history. Was this the real-life inspiration for the labyrinth of the Minotaur? Now, imagine walking through a city where there are no walls, no fortifications, and no armies stationed at its gates. It seems almost unthinkable in the ancient world, where survival often depended on military might and defensive architecture. Yet this was life in Minoan Crete. The Minoans, masters of diplomacy, left their cities open and unguarded, an act that in itself tells the story of how they viewed the world. The absence of fortifications wasn't a sign of naivety or weakness. It was a testament to their dominance over the seas and their ability to cultivate alliances and foster trust among their neighbours. The Minoans relied on their navy, their ships coursing through the Mediterranean, maintaining control over trade routes and protecting their interests, not with swords, but with commerce. The Minoan fleet was not just a symbol of their wealth, it was their shield. These ships, sleek and advanced, ensured the flow of goods across the region. By dominating the sea, they could maintain peace and exert influence far beyond the shores of Crete. They built networks of trade, and with that, a web of diplomacy that kept them secure in a time when war was the norm. As you walked through their open streets, the vibrancy of trade was unmistakable. Goods from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Aegean filled the markets, and the Minoans' reputation as peaceful traders made them valuable allies. But this reliance on the sea and on diplomacy also left them exposed. What would happen if this delicate balance were ever disrupted? Despite the lack of fortifications, they weren't naive to danger. The Minoans were strategic, weaving a web of influence that stretched far beyond the Mediterranean, but their openness, both physical and diplomatic, ultimately made them vulnerable. They believed in a world governed by mutual interest, and for centuries this worked. But no society, no matter how prosperous, can protect itself forever when its strength is built on peaceful exchanges. Then, in what seemed like an instant, the Minoans vanished from the stage of history. Their palaces fell silent, their ships no longer ruled the seas, and their once thriving cities lay in ruins. The sudden collapse of the Minoans has puzzled historians for centuries. How could such a powerful and advanced civilization, one that had dominated the Mediterranean for over 1,000 years, simply disappear? Many believe that nature dealt the first blow. Around 1600 BCE, a volcanic eruption rocked the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini. It was one of the most powerful eruptions in human history, sending shockwaves across the region. The explosion spewed vast amounts of ash into the atmosphere, darkening the skies and choking the air. This cataclysmic event likely triggered massive tsunamis that would have swept across Crete, devastating coastal cities and villages. Picture it. The eruption's plume rising high into the sky, blocking out the sun. Ash fell like snow, and then, without warning, the sea surged. Waves as high as 40 meters raced towards Crete's shores, swallowing everything in their path. Entire ports and ships were destroyed in an instant, and the heart of the Minoan economy, the sea, became their enemy. The very lifeblood of their power was swept away in a single day. But the eruption of Thera wasn't the only cause of their downfall. The Minoans were a resilient people, and they began to rebuild as they had done before. Their cities rose once more, and for a time, life returned to the way it had been. Yet they were never the same. Weakened by the devastation, they became vulnerable to external threats. Enter the Mycenaeans. This rising power from mainland Greece saw an opportunity to expand, and by 1450 BCE they had overtaken the Minoan palaces. Knossos, the grandest of them all, fell under Mycenaean control. The Minoan way of life, its art, its architecture, its influence, was absorbed into the Mycenaean culture, and the Minoans faded into history. It was not a single catastrophe, but a series of events that led to their end. The Minoans were undone by a combination of natural disaster, invasion, and perhaps even internal decline. They were a society built on trade and diplomacy, but when the tides turned, they had little to defend themselves with. In the aftermath of their collapse, the Minoans left behind ruins, art, and one final mystery, their language. Carved into clay tablets, Linear A holds the secrets of their administration, religion, and trade. But there's one problem. We still can't read it. Unlike the later Mycenaeans, who used Linear B, a script we've managed to decipher, Linear A remains an enigma. These symbols, found in palaces like Knossos and Phaistos, tell us that the Minoans were a literate and organized people. But without the ability to understand their language, much of their world remains hidden from us. Linear A isn't just an unsolved puzzle. It's a lost voice. We know it was used for administrative purposes, recording inventories, transactions, and perhaps even religious rituals. But what did it sound like? What stories did it tell? We may never know. Despite this, the undeciphered script offers tantalizing clues. The tablets speak of a complex society with an advanced bureaucracy, but without a Rosetta Stone to bridge the gap, their full meaning escapes us. Everyday archaeologists and linguists work to unlock this code, hoping to one day hear the voice of the Minoans speak again through their own words. And so, Linear A remains a reminder of just how much we still don't know about the Minoans. Their art, architecture, and influence on later civilizations can tell us a great deal. But their language, the very key to their thoughts and beliefs, remains frustratingly out of reach. As we walk deeper into the Minoan world, we uncover a civilization that lived in harmony with the natural world, with the cycles of life and death. Their gods and goddesses were not distant figures ruling from above. They were intertwined with the earth, the sea, and the very life that surrounded them. And at the heart of their religious practice stood one powerful symbol, the bull. For the Minoans, the bull was more than just a symbol of strength and fertility. It was central to their most sacred rituals. This reverence for the bull reached its height in the practice of bull leaping, a dangerous and breathtaking ceremony where men and women hurled themselves over the horns of a charging bull. It was a spectacle of life and death, a dance that embodied their view of nature's balance. In the grand courts of Knossos, these rituals were performed in front of thousands with bull horns, sacred symbols adorning the altars. But what did these rituals mean? The Minoans worshipped not a pantheon of distant gods, but deities who were close, who represented the fertility of the land and the rebirth of life. The snake goddess, another key figure in their religious life, was a protector of fertility and the renewal of life. Her image, arms raised and serpents coiled around her, was a powerful testament to the Minoans' deep connection to the earth. And then there were their sacred spaces, caves, mountain peaks, and even within their sprawling palaces. These were places where the divine met the human. Offerings were made to unseen gods, prayers whispered in the quiet sanctity of nature. The Minoan religion was built around cycles, rituals, and symbols that reflected the ebb and flow of life. But as much as we have learned from their art and their sacred sites, much of the Minoan belief system remains shrouded in mystery. Linear A, their undeciphered script, might hold the key to understanding the deeper aspects of their religion, who their gods truly were, and what these rituals meant to the people who performed them. The Minoans left behind no towering monuments or grand statues, but what they did leave behind was a world of vibrant colour, movement and life. Their art is a window into the soul of a civilization that celebrated nature, harmony and the beauty of everyday existence. The frescoes that adorned the walls of Minoan palaces were unlike anything the world had seen before. Dolphins danced across the walls, their graceful bodies reflecting the sea that sustained life on Crete. Scenes of nature, birds, flowers and marine life were captured with incredible detail and movement, bringing a sense of joy and peace to every room. It was a world painted in vivid colour, where life was celebrated in all its forms. Minoan pottery was just as expressive, featuring intricate designs of octopuses swirling around vases and jars, reflecting their deep connection to the sea. Their art wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about storytelling. Every scene, every design told a story of their relationship with nature, with the sea and with each other. Knossos, the jewel of Minoan architecture, was not only a political and economic hub, but also a cultural one. Here, artists worked tirelessly to create beauty that would inspire awe in those who walked its halls. But their art wasn't confined to the walls. It lived in their everyday objects, jewellery, pottery and tools, imbued with both function and beauty. The Minoans were unique in that their art focused not on war or conquest, but on life itself. While other ancient cultures immortalized kings and warriors, the Minoans immortalized nature and the human experience. They left behind not tales of great battles, but scenes of festivals, dancing and rituals, a testament to the joy and peace they valued above all. As the palaces of Knossos and Phaistos fell silent and the last echoes of Minoan life faded, their legacy did not vanish entirely. Instead, it became a foundation for the civilizations that followed. The influence of the Minoans stretched far beyond their time, quietly shaping the art, architecture and mythology of ancient Greece. At the heart of this legacy is the connection between the Minoans and the later Mycenaean civilization. After the fall of Knossos, the Mycenaeans inherited not only the remnants of the Minoan palaces, but also their culture. They adopted Minoan symbols, practices, and even their writing system, Linear B, which evolved from the still undeciphered Linear A. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Minoans lies in Greek mythology. The labyrinth, a symbol of complexity and mystery, is deeply rooted in Minoan architecture. The palace of Knossos itself, with its sprawling, intricate design, likely inspired the Greek myth of the Minotaur, a creature, half man, half bull, imprisoned in a maze so vast that only the hero Theseus could navigate its depths. The myth of the Minotaur speaks to the influence of Minoan religious practices, where the bull was a sacred symbol representing strength, power, and the cycles of life and death. In the hands of the Greeks, this symbol was transformed into a tale of heroism and conquest, but its origins are unmistakably Minoan. And it wasn't just myths that the Greeks inherited from the Minoans. The grandeur of Minoan architecture, their focus on public spaces and ceremonial halls, found echoes in Greek temples and theatres. The open courtyards of Knossos, where public life and religious ceremonies intertwined, would later be mirrored in the grand agoras and forums of the classical world. Even though the Minoan civilization fell, their ideas lived on through the Mycenaeans and later the Greeks. What started as peaceful, nature-loving islanders found its way into the hearts of a warrior society and eventually into the myths, politics and philosophy that shaped Western civilization. The Minoans may have disappeared from the annals of history, but their influence endures. Their art, their architecture and their way of life still speak to us through the ruins of Knossos and the fragments of their vibrant frescoes. And yet, they remain one of history's great mysteries. We know so much and yet so little. The Minoans were pioneers, masters of trade, diplomacy and culture. They lived in harmony with nature, embraced life through their art and religion, and created a society that flourished for centuries. But their sudden disappearance leaves us with unanswered questions. What were their thoughts, their beliefs? What secrets lie within the undeciphered symbols of Linear A? The Minoans remind us that even the most prosperous civilizations can be fragile. Nature, fate, and the tides of history are unpredictable forces, and yet, even in their fall, the Minoans left a legacy that rippled through the ancient world, influencing the civilizations that followed and shaping the foundations of Western culture. As we stand among the ruins of their palaces, we can still feel the echoes of their world, the beauty, the peace, and the mystery. And perhaps that is the most enduring part of their legacy. In the silence of their abandoned cities, in the undeciphered symbols of their language, the Minoans still speak to us. They remind us that there is always more to discover, always more to learn.